A cold liquid ran down her cheek. Milk, poured on purpose. "Oh, I'm so sorry. My hand slipped." The man laughing was Thomas Johnson, the sales director. Next to him, a young female employee hid her mouth behind a hand decorated with flashy nails, giggling. "What's the big deal? It's a cleaner's job to wipe up spills, isn't it?" Thomas carefully brushed off his suit and smirked at the old woman huddled on the floor. A white puddle spread out, reflecting the dull fluorescent lights. "Careful now, the floor is slippery. If you fall, it's on you. Why are you in the way this early in the morning anyway?" The words were like knives. Cold milk soaked into the old woman's worn uniform. But she didn't say a word. Her name was Margaret Williams. She was 82 years old, the founder and honorary advisor of this company, Apex Consolidated. But no one in this office knew that. It all began a few months ago. When did this company become so twisted? Margaret wondered to herself. It started over 40 years ago from a single factory. Now it was a major corporation with branches all over the country. It was her life's work, her greatest pride. A few years ago, she had passed the title of CEO to her son, Robert Williams. He was serious, an MBA, a hard worker. She had trusted him completely. The company's performance was strong. On paper, there were no problems. But a lifetime of experience told her something was wrong. This company had two faces, one for the public and one hidden in the shadows. So, Margaret made a decision. She would cast aside her name, her history, and work from the very bottom. A cleaner, looked down on by everyone, an old woman. She believed that from this position, she would see the truth, and the first thing she saw was the milk. 11 a.m. that day. Margaret was mopping the office hallway. She moved slowly, methodically, as if in conversation with the floor itself. That's when she heard it. The rhythmic click of leather shoes on the floor. A man in a well-tailored suit appeared. The CEO, Robert Williams. Her only son. He was walking toward her, his eyes glued to his smartphone. For a moment, their eyes met, or so Margaret thought, but Robert's gaze quickly returned to the screen. He walked right past his mother without a word, without a nod, without even acknowledging her existence. Margaret stopped moving. Her own son, her own flesh and blood. He didn't see people anymore. He wasn't a bad man. He had simply become a machine that only saw numbers. When did you stop seeing people and only see the numbers? She whispered the words to no one and slowly began to mop again. She would save this company. But first, she had to understand the battlefield. Her quiet war had just begun. "How many times do I have to tell you? This report is wrong." A furious shout echoed down the hall. Margaret was on her way to the administration office after finishing her morning cleaning. In front of the copy machine, a young woman stood frozen. Mia Davis, 23 years old. The man yelling at her was a middle-aged manager. "I'm very sorry, but according to your instructions, don't talk back to me. This is why you'll always be a temp." The words hit like a slap. Mia's shoulders trembled slightly. The brand of temp. The word was thrown at her like filth. Margaret stopped in her tracks. She had seen the young woman before. She looked like someone who lived her life holding her breath, trying not to bother anyone. A beige cardigan and black slacks. A clean face with no makeup, easily forgotten. Even after the manager left, Mia couldn't move. She stared at the floor, her hands clenched so tightly in front of her that her knuckles turned white. Margaret walked slowly toward her. The sound of her footsteps made Mia look up, startled. Her eyes were red and watery, but no tears fell. Was she unable to cry? or had she forbidden herself from crying? "Are you all right?" Margaret asked. Mia shook her head slightly. "No, please don't worry about me." Her voice was thin. "I've been told not to speak up, since I'm not a real employee." Her eyes were a mix of fear and resignation. Margaret nodded silently. After a moment, she asked quietly, "Why do you stay here? If they treat you like this?" Mia gave a weak, bitter smile. "I don't have any parents. My grandmother raised me all by herself." Her voice trembled. "But now, she's old. She's been bedridden for a long time." She explained that she started working right after high school, that she had to take any job she could find, temp or otherwise, just to make money, and that she wanted to become a full-time employee. She believed that at this company, she could one day give her grandmother a better life. She spoke in broken sentences. Margaret felt a cold thorn pierce her heart. This girl had no one to protect her, and yet she was standing here, fighting so hard to protect someone else. "What's your name?" Mia Davis." "Mia, would you like to get lunch sometime?" I only know the cheap specials in the cafeteria, though." Mia's eyes widened in surprise. Then, like a small flower blooming, a smile touched her lips. "Yes, I'd like that very much." That smile. It reminded Margaret of herself a long, long time ago. She placed a hand over her heart. Before that light went out, she had to do something. A quiet flame ignited in Margaret's soul. That night, the lights of the head office were out, except for one department. Only the soft tapping of a keyboard could be heard. Typing, deleting, typing again, at a worn-out desk in the corner. Mia Davis was staring at her computer. The clock read well past 8 p.m. Her face was a mask of concentration. Every ounce of her focus was on her fingertips. Margaret was coming back from emptying the trash in the executive boardroom. She noticed the light. On the screen was the final page of a project proposal. Sophisticated graphs, detailed data analysis, a structure that perfectly understood the target audience. This was not the work of an amateur. Anyone with a trained eye would see its value instantly. When Margaret spoke, Mia nearly jumped out of her chair. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll lock up right away. I'm not here to scold you. Did you do all this by yourself?" Margaret pointed at the monitor. "Yes, I heard that even temp workers had a chance to submit proposals. I know it's a long shot, but this will get approved. It's brilliant." Margaret said it with absolute certainty. "The content is excellent, but more than that, it has the power to move people." Mia's eyes welled up slightly. "No one's ever said that to me before." Margaret said nothing, just gave a deep, slow nod. This girl was the real deal. The next morning, right after the regular meeting ended, Mia, holding her proposal close to her chest, knocked on the boardroom door. Inside, the sales director, Thomas Johnson, was sitting alone, leaning back in his chair. "Excuse me, Mr. Johnson, about the project we discussed the other day." Thomas frowned. You, the temp, have a proposal?" He snatched the papers from her hand. He flipped through a few pages. It took only a few seconds. He snorted. "I see." That was the signal. Rip. A sharp, tearing sound echoed in the room. Thomas Johnson had ripped Mia's proposal in two without a moment's hesitation. "What is this? A fairy tale?" His voice dripped with contempt. "All numbers, no reality. Just idealism." Mia couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak. "But, the data is all—" "Shut up!" Thomas's roar filled the room. "A temp's job is to do as they're told. Who told you to come up with ideas?" The air in the boardroom turned to ice. The other employees in the room all looked away. Some stared at their phones, others at the floor. No one would look at Mia. She was completely alone. Then Thomas theatrically picked up another document. He was beaming. "Ah, now this is what I'm talking about. Look at this, simple and easy to understand." He held up a proposal written by his son, Mason Johnson. It was just 2 sheets of A4 paper. No graphs, no data, just a few random thoughts written down. But the name Mason Johnson on the page was all that mattered. "Excellent work, Mason. I see real talent here." "Yes, he has a bright future ahead of him." The others chimed in, their voices slick with flattery. No one glanced at the shredded pieces of Mia's hard work scattered on the floor. From behind a cleaning cart, Margaret saw everything. Her grip tightened on the handle of her mop. Injustice. A world so shallow, so ugly. Mia's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor. With trembling hands, she began to pick up the torn pieces. "I'm so sorry." Her voice sounded like she was punishing herself. A quiet, furious flame began to burn in Margaret's chest. "I will not let her tears be in vain." She made a silent vow and slipped away without a sound. Just after 11 a.m. Margaret was polishing the floors in the hallway lined with reception rooms. There was an important visitor today, and the entire floor was tense. That's when she heard it. Whispers coming from the crack of a slightly open door. And peeking inside, she saw Thomas Johnson handing a thick brown envelope to another man. It was clearly bulging with cash. The man who took it looked like an executive from a client company. An expensive suit, a luxury watch on his wrist. He glanced inside the envelope and nodded with satisfaction. "About that other matter, I'll be counting on you again next month, Mr. Johnson." Margaret held her breath, pretending to wring out a cloth. Her hands were trembling slightly. Even after the door closed completely, she couldn't move. She was certain now. There was a darkness in this company. As evening fell, Margaret was collecting trash in front of the sales director's office on the 4th floor. The room was empty. "Excuse me?" she said quietly and went inside. On the desk was a half-empty can of coffee and a messy pile of receipts. Things a cleaner should never touch. But Margaret, after checking that no one was around, carefully picked one up. "Club M, Gold Coast. Party of 8, $2,000. Taxi fare, $200. The timestamp was 3 a.m. In the corner of the receipt, the company's official seal was stamped next to Business Entertainment Expense. Margaret silently took out her smartphone. Click, click. The quiet shutter sound echoed faintly. The club in Gold Coast, the late-night taxi, the bouquets of flowers. All of it paid for with company money. It was an obviously fraudulent flow of cash. But Margaret's expression remained unchanged. Not anger, not excitement, just a cold, calm focus as she documented the evidence. This was how she fought. Numbers can lie, but they can't hide the smell of corruption. Just as she whispered those words, footsteps were approaching from down the hall. "Damn, did I lock it?" It was Thomas's voice. Trouble. Margaret's body went rigid. The air stood still. The phone disappeared into her pocket. The receipts went back where they were. Pretending to tie up the trash bag, Margaret turned her back to the door. Click. The door opened. "Oh, it's you. Don't scare me like that." It was the sales director, Thomas Johnson. Margaret said nothing, just gave a small nod. She picked up her bucket and started to leave. "Hey, wait." The voice from behind her made her heart jump once, but her face remained a mask. "Have you been in here this whole time?" Thomas's suspicious gaze bored into her back. Did you touch anything on my desk? Margaret turned around slowly. The trash can was full. She answered in a frail voice. That's all. Excuse me. Thomas stared at her, sizing her up. Finally, he snorted. Whatever. Next time, knock when I'm here. He said dismissively. Excuse me. Nodding respectfully, Margaret quickly left the room. The only sound in the office hallway was the squeak of her cart's wheels. It spoke for the tension she felt. The water in her bucket felt strangely warm, just like the stagnant air in this company. Margaret headed for the utility closet. To wash away the real filth, she needed fresh water. Who sent this file to the client? An angry shout cut through the office air. Clutching the document was Mason, Director Johnson's son. The same man who had been praised for his empty proposal. He had only been with the company for a year, thanks to his father's connections, but everyone knew he was the one person you couldn't touch. You submitted it with these numbers? Are you kidding me? As Mason roared, the younger employees scattered their gazes like frightened birds. Who did this? The client is furious! Mason's eyes landed on Mia, who was organizing documents in the corner of the office. It was you, Mia. You were making copies yesterday. You must have given them the wrong file. Mia gasped. What? I wasn't given any such instructions. And this file? Don't make excuses! Mason slammed his fist on the desk. The dull thud made Mia flinch. Are you going to deny it? Or are you going to admit it and apologize? I really didn't. As Mia struggled to find the words, Director Johnson appeared. Mia. His voice was quiet, but it had the coldness of a snake. Do you really think a temp worker like you can afford to be so defiant? When you get fired, where will you go next? Who's going to hire someone with just a high school diploma? Thomas continued, his tone mocking. You have your grandmother's care to think about, don't you? No other company would ever take a chance on someone like you. Her grandmother? At that one word, the color drained from Mia's face. Her knees were trembling slightly. The office was silent. No one helped. No one intervened. This was just another day at this company. But they didn't realize. From the shadows of the copy machine, a single lens was pointed at them. Margaret's smartphone. The red light of the recording app was silently capturing everything. The pieces were now in place. Margaret thought to herself. Her hands were perfectly still. Her ears were catching every sound. Finally, Mia squeezed out a trembling voice. Yes, I'm very sorry. Good. Thomas nodded in satisfaction, patted his son's shoulder, and walked away. Mia was left alone, as if she didn't exist, picking up the scattered papers from the floor. Margaret watched her and stopped the recording. She would not be silent any longer. A quiet oath was taking solid form in her heart. Did you hear? Another temp quit suddenly. Seriously? The one from last month left quickly too, right? I hear that department is hell. They're probably smart to leave. In a corner of the company cafeteria. While wiping down the area around the water cooler, Margaret listened. The conversations behind her stuck in her ears like glue. The topic was always the same. The shockingly short time that temps and new hires stayed with the company. The number of people who had resigned in the last 6 months was over a dozen. Most of them were concentrated in the sales department, run by Thomas, and the planning department, under his influence. Margaret had been assembling evidence like a puzzle from the shredded trash. Torn business cards, shredded copies of submitted documents, and on the fragments of a resignation form, the words power harassment were faintly visible. This wasn't one person's doing. The rot was deep. It was an organizational cover-up. Margaret compiled the photos she had taken and backed up the audio recordings. She combined them with the fraudulent expense receipts into a single file. Meanwhile, in the CEO's office, Margaret's son, Robert Williams, was looking over the monthly report. Profit margins are up. Employee turnover is stable compared to last year. Yes, sir. Operations are running smoothly. At his secretary's words, Robert nodded with satisfaction. Good. Let's keep this pace for the rest of the quarter. Robert was brilliant, strong with numbers, decisive in his judgments, but his eyes only saw the figures on the monitor. He couldn't see who was crying on the other side of the screen. He didn't realize the price for his blindness was about to come due. One afternoon, the executive boardroom was in an uproar. A critical error had been found in a document submitted to a major client. The name on the submission form was Mia Davis. Mia again. Sales Director Thomas Johnson sighed, pressing his temples. How many times is that this month? Nearby, the whispers circulated that his son, Mason, had altered Mia's original proposal. That's not true. I didn't do it. Mia denied it, her voice trembling. Then who did? Mason slammed the table and cornered Mia. Director, this woman is useless. She probably messed with my file on purpose to make herself look better. Do you have any proof? The moment Mia challenged him, Thomas's eyes turned cold. A temp is talking back to a full-time employee? The air froze. Listen here. If we say you did it, then that becomes the truth. Don't you dare think a disposable worker like you can stand on the same level as us? Just then, Margaret, having finished her cleaning, was passing by the hallway. Through the glass, she could see Mia biting her lip. Her shoulders were shaking. Inside, 3 men were surrounding one woman, Mia hurling insults at her. Margaret didn't hesitate. She opened the boardroom door. Excuse me? For a second, time stopped. What is it, old woman? This isn't a playground. Thomas scowled. What is your basis for saying she did it? To corner someone with no evidence just because of your position? Is that how things are done here? Margaret's quiet voice resonated. Her words made Thomas's irritation flare. Shut up. A cleaner has no business sticking her nose in this. You want me to fire you too? A few snickers rippled through the room. Mia, her face pale, just stared at the floor. Margaret looked straight at the 3 men and answered calmly. Yes, that's fine. I have noted your words. No one understood the true weight of that statement. Margaret was unshaken. With a blank expression, she took her smartphone from a pouch on her waist. She stood by the hallway window, tapped a name in her call history. The phone rang once before the other side picked up. In a calm voice, Margaret said just one thing. It's time. Please proceed with that matter. An understood came from the other end. Ending the call, Margaret began to walk slowly down the hall. In her pocket was the voice recorder that had captured the recent conversation. In her bag, a small USB drive containing all the evidence she had gathered over the past few weeks waited silently for its turn. She passed the boardroom. She could still hear the men's laughter from inside. That old woman was an eyesore. Good riddance. Margaret didn't give them a single glance. She continued down the stairs. That this old woman was at the center of the storm about to break, no one yet knew. 3 hours later, an email was sent to the entire company. The subject line read, "An emergency all-hands meeting will be held today at 4 p.m. for all employees." 4 o'clock. That single notification brought all work at Apex Consolidated to a halt. The subject was, "Emergency all-hands meeting." The location was the founder's auditorium. A murmur rippled through the hall. What about our sales numbers? Don't tell me it's more budget cuts. Employees grumbled, their faces filled with confusion. The stage in front was empty. A single spotlight shone on the vacant space. Who was going to speak? The CEO? Surely they wouldn't announce layoffs at a time like this. As suspicion swirled, the rear doors of the auditorium opened silently. Everyone held their breath at the figure that appeared. It wasn't an executive. It was an old woman in a faded gray work uniform and worn-out sneakers. Her white hair was tied back messily, her back slightly stooped. It was the cleaner, Margaret Williams. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Confusion quickly turned to contemptuous laughter. "You've got to be kidding me. It's the cleaning lady. This has to be some kind of mistake." In the back rows, younger employees pointed their phones, their shoulders shaking with laughter. Mr. Miller from the planning department spat out, "What is this farce?" Next to his father, sales director Thomas Johnson, Mason Johnson crossed his arms and sneered. "That old hag is still here. I thought I fired her earlier. She just doesn't quit." "A cleaner's revenge? Someone's seen too many movies." But Margaret paid no attention to the jeers. She walked slowly across the stage and stood before the microphone. In her hand was a single document. At her feet, a laptop and a small USB drive. "The screen, please." Margaret's voice was quiet. As if in response, a giant screen behind the stage descended silently. The murmuring began to die down. Margaret said nothing more. Her silence began to command the room. The laughter faded, replaced by an eerie quiet. "Now then, let us begin." Her voice was clear and firm, soft, but with an unbreakable core of steel. No one could speak. Margaret scanned the auditorium slowly, then took one step back. At that moment, another figure emerged from the side of the stage, the CEO, Robert Williams. A wave of tension ran through the employees. Robert stood next to his mother, took the microphone, and drew a deep breath. Then he announced, clearly, "Let me introduce you. This is my mother, Margaret Williams." Time stopped. "And the founder of Apex Consolidated. As of today, she will be returning to active duty as honorary advisor." In the frozen silence, the sound of someone kicking a chair echoed. Someone else dropped their smartphone. "What? Honorary advisor?" The employees who had been laughing moments before were now pale and rigid. Those who had been triumphant were frozen in their seats, unable to move. Sales Director Thomas Johnson felt a cold sweat break out all over his body. "A cleaner has no business sticking her nose in this." His own voice from a few hours ago echoed inside his skull. His son, Mason, who had been smirking beside him, now had his mouth clamped shut. Mr. Miller, from the planning department, remembered the sound of his own high-pitched laughter as he'd watched her get drenched in milk that morning. In the silence, Margaret wordlessly inserted the USB drive into the laptop. This was not a cleaner's revenge. This was the hour of judgment, brought by the founder, Margaret Williams. The house lights dimmed. On the screen, the waveform of an audio file appeared. Margaret spoke quietly. "Play it." An arrogant voice boomed from the speakers. "What happens when you get fired? What will you do when your parents get sick?" "Temps need to shut up and listen. Proof? If we say you did it, that becomes the proof." The voices belonged to Sales Director Thomas Johnson and his son, Mason. Next, a hidden camera video from a reception room appeared on the screen. The footage clearly showed Thomas Johnson handing a thick envelope to a man from a client company. The auditorium lights went down, leaving only the white glow of the screen. Displayed on it was Apex Consolidated's confidential client list. Then, a slideshow of countless receipts flashed across the screen. An expensive club in Gold Coast, limo service bills, pricey gifts. All of them were processed as expenses for Sales Director Thomas Johnson. The date, the amount, the purpose. The data was perfectly organized, leaving no room for excuses. And then, the final piece of evidence played. A hidden video from the boardroom. "This proposal is a waste of time." Mason Johnson's mocking voice. "So arrogant for a temp," Mr. Miller chimed in. In the video, the proposal that Mia Davis had poured her heart into was ripped to shreds. The dry, tearing sound and the crude laughter echoed through the silent auditorium. The air turned to ice. Someone's sharp intake of breath sounded unnaturally loud. Director Johnson's face was ashen. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. His son, Mason, had collapsed in his chair, head bowed. Mr. Miller covered his face with his hands, despair seeping through his fingers. Margaret took the microphone and began to speak, quietly but clearly. "I started this company with the hope that it would be a place where everyone was respected, regardless of age, gender, full-time or temporary. A company where everyone who works hard is judged fairly. That was my ideal." There was no anger in her voice, only a deep, profound sadness. "But it seems we lost our way somewhere." When the video stopped, the auditorium was as silent as a graveyard. Margaret placed her hands on the lectern. "For the past few months, I have arrived earlier than anyone else and left later than anyone else. I did this because I needed to see with my own eyes if the roots of this company had rotted." The employees all stared at the floor. Not a single person could look up. "And today, I am certain." Margaret paused. That moment of silence was heavier than any words. "As long as people like you are here, this company has no future." It was a thunderclap. Director Johnson began to tremble and managed to choke out a few words. No, it's a misunderstanding. That recording, I was doing it for the company." His excuses were incoherent. His son, Mason, was completely silent, his legs shaking. Mr. Miller, his face still covered, mumbled, "It was just a little joke. I didn't mean anything by it." But the atmosphere for forgiveness was long gone. Margaret's gaze slowly shifted to the back of the room, to the young employees who had been laughing in the hallway that day. They shot to their feet, desperately bowing their heads. We are so sorry. We had no idea you were the honorary advisor." "That doesn't matter, does it?" Margaret's quiet voice cut through their excuses. "We're sorry. We've learned our lesson. We will never judge a person by their appearance again." With beads of sweat on their foreheads, their tone shifted from excuses to pleading. When the person you looked down on is revealed to hold your entire future in their hands, human dignity crumbles so easily. Still, Margaret did not berate them. Everyone makes mistakes." "But a person who cannot face their mistakes cannot grow. This is your last chance to change this company." No one could argue. The absolute truth of her words washed away any feelings of shame or resentment. Margaret's eyes found a single woman in the crowd, her shoulders shaking as she cried. Mia Davis, the woman who had been trampled on again and again, yet still found the strength to stand. She was the very hope this company had been about to lose. As the tension in the room reached its peak, Margaret turned to her son, Robert Williams. "You have only looked at this company's numbers. That is why you couldn't hear the voices from the floor. You overlooked the pain, the effort, and the tears of your people." It was not a mother's question, but a founder's indictment. Robert's lips were pressed into a thin line, his clenched fists white. He looked down, his voice trembling as he answered. "I didn't have your eye for people, Mom. I thought I trusted them, but I wasn't paying attention at all." Robert bowed his head low. The title of CEO vanished. leaving only the back of a sun. From the back of the auditorium, a name was called out quietly. "Mia Davis, please come to the stage." For a moment, she didn't think they meant her. Her eyes darted around. Every face in the room turned to look at her. Had she done something wrong? Forcing her trembling legs to move, Mia stood up. The walk to the stage felt impossibly long. She could barely feel her feet. But the calm gaze of Margaret on the stage was the only light in her terrified heart. Mia stood before them. A microphone was offered to her, but she couldn't speak. She just stood there. A few seconds of silence passed. Margaret gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry to have startled you, but you have every right to stand here with your head held high." Margaret looked out at the audience and announced in a clear voice, "This young woman's proposal was one of the best I have ever seen." Mia's eyes, for the first time, shot wide open. The content, the structure, and most importantly, the heart she put into it for the people who work here. It is a document that every leader should study. Finally, a voice escaped Mia's dry lips. I thought I was going to be yelled at again. I thought I was going to be blamed for someone else's mistake." As she spoke, tears began to stream down her face. "But you were watching." "You saw me." Her trembling voice shook the tense air of the auditorium. From somewhere in the crowd, the sound of sniffing could be heard. Then Robert stepped forward and took the microphone. "Mia Davis, effective today, I would like to officially welcome you as a full-time employee. We need your strength for the reforms we are about to begin." Mia let out a choked sob and nodded again and again. It was the first time she, who had been treated as if she were invisible, was finally told, "You belong here." Breaking the silence, applause erupted from somewhere in the room. First one person, then another. Like ripples in a pond, a warm wave of applause gently filled the entire auditorium. As Mia looked back in surprise, one of the young employees who had once ignored her spoke up, giving a small nod. "I'm sorry. We were wrong." Another female employee whispered softly, "Honestly, I thought your proposal was amazing. I couldn't say it." Her words brought fresh tears to Mia's eyes. But this time, she straightened her back and smiled through the tear stains. Seeing that smile, Margaret nodded quietly. "This is just the beginning." "Yes, I'll do my best." Margaret's hand gave Mia's back a firm, encouraging push. A few days later, a large poster was hung in the lobby of the main building. "See the person, hear the voice." Below it, the Apex Consolidated logo was printed small. Employees arriving for work would stop and look up at the words, as if to absorb them. In the back of that same lobby, a lone figure moved quietly. It was Margaret. Her white hair tied back, her posture straight, silently polishing the floor. Without anyone noticing, the founder and honorary advisor had returned to her work behind the scenes. She didn't need a suit or a title. As long as the people who worked here were okay, that was enough. Margaret put down her mop, put away her bucket, and gave the poster one last look. "Now then, what shall I polish next?" Her whisper reached no one's ears, but her shoulders carried a clear sense of pride. Yes, I can hear you." Mia, with a brand new employee ID hanging around her neck, sat on a bench by a small garden behind the company building. She was on the phone with her grandmother. A smile spread across her face as her grandmother kept asking her to repeat herself. "It's not a dream, Grandma. I'm a full-time employee now. You don't have to worry anymore." The end of her sentence trembled slightly. Thank you, truly, for getting me this far. On the other end of the line, she could hear the faint sound of sniffling. A short distance away, in the shadow of the bushes, Margaret was wiping down her mop. She heard the conversation. Her face was turned away, but you could see the gentle softening around her eyes. Mia's voice seemed to ride the spring breeze and travel far away. Margaret smiled to herself and muttered, "My real work has only just begun." The words were not meant for anyone, but they echoed, quiet and strong.